We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and we're gonna get arrested, they'll shave our heads, and we're gonna have to make root beer in the toilet. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Jurassic Park sequel month, and this week we are talking the 2015 film Jurassic World. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host that is secretly part raptor, Andrew Williams. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
Man, I friggin' wish. Yeah. I love me some dinosaurs. We've talked about it a couple of times at this point, as well as on the previous episodes. But this is kind of the first Jurassic Park movie that I actively, cognizantly remember seeing in a theater. I know I probably saw Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 in theaters, but I was in my early teens. That stuff's all hazy at this point. I remember this movie coming out. I remember it kind of being a big deal. Obviously, Chris Pratt was a huge deal at the time. Was kind of being lauded as potentially a movie star, and that him being in a movie was enough to make it a success. And that led to this Jurassic World, a kind of big budget return for a franchise that to that point had been dormant 15 years. And it's maybe a little bit of an exception to our Jurassic Park month, but I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. We're going to talk about the credentials of this movie, the box office and critical rating, and let's go ahead and get out of the way now. By all metrics, this movie wasn't exactly poorly received. There's a certain bar to the fan base or audience that didn't really like it, but by all means, it is greatly outweighed by the people that did. However, we got 5 episodes in the month of January, 5 weeks, and it just didn't make a lot of sense to skip over this one, especially since the 2 that come after it, well, they qualify for our premise a bit more. So we want to be a little bit, we just want to be complete in our Jurassic Park sequel month. Now, all that being said, of course, we are a hashtag positivity podcast. We're going to talk about all the things that we like about this movie, what it does well. It's what we do. But here in the intro, talking about our history with the movie, I want to take a point to kind of be honest with our initial feelings when we saw it in theaters. Because like you mentioned, for people our age, this is the first Jurassic Park movie we remember clearly seeing in theaters, where if we saw it in theaters, it's because we decided to go by our own volition and actually made a point to drive to the theater and buy our ticket and everything. And yeah, I saw this movie in theaters. And I've always been a huge fan of the original Jurassic Park movie, not so much the franchise as a whole and hashtag PP and all, but I was very interested to see what they were doing, kind of rebooting the movie, but it's also a sequel, a legacy sequel, if you will. And I gotta say, my initial impressions of this movie, I saw it in theaters, I don't know if I have ever felt more fine about a movie. I was whelmed 100%. I could not have been more whelmed. I did not hate this movie when I saw it in theaters. I can't say I loved it. I didn't go back and see it again. In fact, I haven't watched it again until this week preparing for this episode. But I saw the movie. I thought it was a fine, fun time. But I didn't feel compelled to see it again or to see the movies that came after it. I just kind of thought, you know what? The Jurassic Park franchise, I don't think it's for me anymore. And again, I wasn't trashing the movie. I didn't hate it. I was fine. I couldn't have been more middle of the road. If I had to, if my job was reviewing movies at the time, write a review, I don't know what I would have wrote, because I just would have been like, this happens, and it was fine. How about you, Andrew? What were your initial takeaways when you saw this movie in theaters?
And my initial takeaways, I'm pretty sure, were that I liked it. Obviously, like you said, you're not matching the OG, and even the reviews, which are generally positive, all kind of include that caveat of it can't match the original. And the movie kind of tries to make that a story point as well. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But overall, I remember watching it and being like, all right, cool. Like you said, though, like, I don't feel like I thought about it very much, though. Like, I watched it, I liked it, but I wasn't jonesing for more in a way. But, they gave us more, which you'll find out in a few weeks. But, yeah, overall, my reception was generally positive. I had a good time. I liked it. So, like I said, it's a bit of a strange situation where I wouldn't go as far as to say that it successfully existed, which just kind of feels like how a lot of people felt about it. They were like, this movie happened, and not in a bad way, but just in that it maybe didn't really stand out very much. But overall, I had a good time watching it, and I was excited to see dinosaurs on my big screen again. I can't deny it. It was pretty sweet.
It's a little weird now, isn't it, to go to Target and see the toys.
Yeah.
And the franchise as a whole is Jurassic World now. Like, it's retroactively, the whole umbrella is Jurassic World. It's got the new blue logo instead of the red, even if it's not from a specific Jurassic World entry. It's just like it's become the new umbrella term, which I didn't realize this, but the name Jurassic World actually comes from the novels in a way. Whenever they collected the first book and The Lost World into one edition, they called it Michael Crichton's Jurassic World. So, like, the entire story was Jurassic World. And then, of course, they use that for the title of this movie, and it's kind of become this new term to represent everything. But, yeah, I mean, just as, as a millennial kid, I'm never going to look at it and be like, that's the Jurassic World franchise. But
no,
that's kind of us just
absolutely
being
not.
Old men, though. I mean, that's people younger than us or kids these days are going to know it as Jurassic World, and that is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm not wrong.
They are not. It's it's a weird thing to think about because I technically existed for both phases of this franchise. It's not like a Star Wars situation where like I wasn't alive for the original trilogy. Like I remember,
it's like people that were around for the first Star Wars insist on calling the first one Star Wars and not A New Hope, and they get like annoyed, like, oh, it's just called Star Wars. When I say Star Wars, I'm talking about the first entry, and to me, it's always been Episode 4, A New Hope, but that wasn't there initially. So it's
Raiders of the Lost Ark gets similar because the first Indiana Jones movie is not called Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just called Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, yeah,
so you get similar elitists in the Indiana Jones fandom that refuse to call it Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. They're like, I'm like, I get it. It's less words, but I disagree with why you're saying less words. Like,
look, if they reissued this franchise and they called the first one Jurassic World Episode 1 Jurassic Park, I would vehemently my reaction to that would be I would not buy it. I might boycott.
That's fair. I get it. I completely agree at that point. When you phrase it like that, I get it. I 100% get it. It's like we were just talking about the way DC is branding all the Long Halloween related books now, where there's Batman the Long Halloween Deluxe Edition, but then it's Batman the Long Halloween, the sequel, Batman Dark Victory Deluxe Edition. It says Long Halloween again on giant letters, and then Dark Victory.
It's genuinely confusing at the bookstore. Right. It looks like you're picking up the Long Halloween, but it's just a story that happens to exist in the same quote timeline. Like it's just
the same writer artist. That's all it is. It's literally all it is. But yeah, it's that's a much worse example. That's really, like I said, they're genuinely making that more confusing for people. I don't understand that at all. But all you have to put at the top is from the team that brought you Batman the Long Halloween, which is, I'm pretty sure, what all the old versions said. So, yeah. But
Glass Onion from the writer and director of Knives Out. That's all you had to do. All right.
And to be fair to Rian Johnson, I don't think he has ever acknowledged the full title of it. He's only ever called it Glass Onion. He refuses to be like Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. That was my favorite line in the movie when he was like, "This mystery is a real glass onion, a Knives Out mystery, if you will."
All right, let's set the stage a little bit for the movie we are talking about.
Let's get back on track.
Today, Jurassic World, released June 12th of 2015, made on a budget of $150 million at the box office. Huge hit, brings in $1.67 billion, the third highest grossing film at the time of its release. Incredible. Critically, is pretty well received. Has a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes and even higher audience score. So again, we want to acknowledge this because every time we announce the movies we're covering, inevitably there's someone that's like, oh, why are you covering that movie? Or why are you covering that movie? We try to be objective about it. We look at the numbers, but I want to acknowledge in a normal circumstance, this movie probably wouldn't qualify for our podcast. But given that we're doing an entire month of sequels, we've got to talk about it. So Andrew, this movie, huge hit, well received. You could maybe argue it hasn't aged as well if you're really looking to like poke holes in it. But I mean, that's kind of stretching it. It's a well received movie.
It is. And I mean, like I said, it made a ton of money. Like I said, it really contributed to that kind of idea that like following like Guardians of the Galaxy and Jurassic World, that like Chris Pratt was oddly potentially this like next coming of the movie star. Because like in our day and age, we have kind of moved to that point where the idea of a person selling a film has kind of faded away to the idea of the franchise itself kind of being the selling point. This is something you'll get a lot of kind of old man yells at cloud type rants from some older people, but it's not an inherently untrue statement. There are certainly actors that I'm going to go see every time, but the idea of somebody simply being in something, making something a hit, is kind of a rarer thing these days. But at the time, between Guardians of the Galaxy and Jurassic World and a couple of other things, people were like, Chris Pratt might have that. Like he kind of was really rounding that corner where he had several, like, not just hits, massive hits, like in a row with stuff that, in the case of something like Guardians of the Galaxy, was unknown. I know Marvel was a proven brand at that point, but Guardians was still a bit of a gamble. And then even Jurassic World, which was a revitalizing of a franchise that had kind of sputtered out already. So to have those both be massive hits definitely made people think that Pratt was going to be this big deal. Not to say he's not a big deal. I mean, he's certainly still out there doing his thing. But this was, by all indications, a huge hit. I mean, it was exactly the kind of thing that, you know, you as Universal Pictures want to see. So
I remember this meme going around socials at the time that said Chris Pratt has 3 different Lego figures based on him. And if that's not success, I don't know what is. And
what's the
that's
third?
Pretty incredible. Emmett in the Lego movie.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, 3 separate characters that turned into Lego figure. Or one that, you know.
One of them is the Lego figure.
It's the Lego figure. But yeah, that's pretty incredible. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure if I can think of many others. And now he's the voice of Mario. Who's to say that's not going to get its own
And Garfield.
Lego. Is that real or was that a rumor? Is he really the voice of Garfield?
He is. That was what was so funny about it, is like it got announced right after he was announced.
Andrew, I thought that was a bit, like, by the internet. That's a real thing. He's really voicing Garfield.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you serious?
Chris, this was the dumbest thing I could have possibly joked about. Like, why would I do that?
That's... Oh, man. Okay.
Man,
Sure.
No, I thought it was that. I thought that was like, there was this period of time where it felt like movie studios were just kind of like, yes, no one wants to see Chris Pratt anymore. Excellent. And they just started casting him in voice stuff all the time. But no, that is a real thing that is supposedly happening.
All right. Well, maybe we'll get to talk about that on a future episode. But for now, let's look at the creative team of this film. It is written by the writing team of Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver. Now, they originate the script. It does get a rewrite that we'll talk about, but this is where the bones, if you will, of the story comes from. Now, as a writing duo, they're responsible for several films before this, but most prominently, the Rise and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes movies, which I can never remember which one is the first one and which one is the second one, because both Rise and Dawn sound like a first entry. Andrew, which one's first?
Yep. Rise is first.
Rise is first. Okay. I love that whole series. I know, not to sound too much of a hipster about it, but I thought Rise was really good. I saw that in theaters and I was on board from the get-go. And I feel like a lot of people kind of came on with Dawn and that kind of, they were like, oh yeah, I'm on board. I was already on the monkey train, people. But I enjoy those movies. I enjoy that franchise. And man, talk about high profile writing credits. They also wrote Avatar 2 and are involved creatively in some capacity with all of the Avatar movies we are going to be getting over the next, 50 years or however long he's making those. So probably not hurting for money and involved in, some very high profile work. Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver.
Yeah. So yeah, you can definitely, this is a movie that was gestating for a long time. Was sitting in the lab. Dare you
Encased in amber.
Encased in amber. But yeah, so they took a couple of ideas that Spielberg had, kind of worked them into a script. Some of those were apparently like the fully functioning dinosaur theme park, a human who has a relationship with trained raptors, and a human eating dinosaur escapes and has to be stopped. Those are apparently bare bones Steven Spielberg ideas for Jurassic Park sequels. I don't know if you know this, Steven Spielberg, but human eating dinosaur that escapes and has to be stopped is in all of these movies. But
guys, I got this brilliant idea of where we can take the franchise.
Sorry, folks. Hashtag PP. It was just a little strange to see that. But yes, so they start work on it originally, but yeah, like I said, I didn't even realize they were on the Avatar sequels. I just saw that. They also wrote the recent live action Mulan. So yeah, they're definitely still out there and definitely still doing high profile stuff, including yet another Planet of the Apes film. So good for them.
Now, Colin Trevorrow was hired as a director, and he brings his creative partner Derek Connolly on board, and together they do a rewrite of the script. Not dramatically changing the story from what I can tell, but definitely characterizations and punching things up a bit, as happens with Hollywood scripts. The vast majority of Derek Connolly's credits are working alongside Colin Trevorrow, so I can go ahead and talk about him, our director of this film. Now, we've kind of mentioned him by proxy on previous episodes of our podcast because we talk a lot about the kind of trend at the time of having a small-ish indie hit and immediately getting tickets to the kingdom for a large franchise. It's happened a lot in the MCU. It happened here because most prominently, what he's known for before this film is a movie called Safety Not Guaranteed, which is a critical darling, but not a box office smash. And I haven't seen the movie personally, but I don't think you watch it and you're like, oh, this guy can direct CG dinosaurs. Like, there's no kind of shared DNA or threads or themes that would make you think Jurassic World. But again, that was kind of in vogue at the time for these big studios to give a small director the green light for a big budget. It happened here, and Colin Trevorrow is on board.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the MCU, there's quite a few examples of that. Probably notably was Ryan Coogler, whose stuff to that point before Black Panther had been pretty low stakes. We're talking Fruitvale Station, Creed, things that are great movies, don't misunderstand me, but not effects heavy, not CG heavy, not super, not the MCU. And it was a very common thing for a while, and a lot of times they came out swinging and knocked it out of the park. And I mean, from every stat you can look at, Colin Trevorrow did just that with Jurassic World. Like I said, this movie cost like $150 million and made like $1.6 billion. So that's a pretty big return on investment. But Colin Trevorrow definitely blows up with this. Got a bunch of high profile stuff after this, not all of which came to pass, but definitely still out there doing his thing.
Well, Andrew, I think it's time that we talk about this movie. We cross that threshold and talk about everything we enjoy about this film. Everything it does well. Hashtag Positivity Podcast. You ready?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Jurassic World is a successful theme park that features living, genetically modified dinosaurs as its main attraction. Claire is the operations manager of the park, and while her two nephews are visiting, 16-year-old Zach and 11-year-old Gray, a new dangerous dinosaur called Indominus Rex breaks containment and causes a panic. The park is forced to shut down and evacuate its guests as Claire turns to Owen Grady and his knowledge of the dinosaurs, specifically the velociraptors, for help stopping the new threat. The tension ramps up when Vic Hoskins, the head of security, takes matters into his own hands and greenlights an operation to use raptors as weapons to hunt down the Indominus Rex. But when the raptors don't obey commands as expected, the humans find themselves outnumbered and on the run. Who could have seen it coming? Andrew, the dinosaur park becomes dangerous. I think there's no surprises here as far as the way the story goes. But gotta say, starting the hashtag PP, has the positivity up front. I think setting this movie in you're taking it back to a theme park, and not only that, but a successful operating theme park is the smartest thing you could do with a Jurassic Park sequel, especially after that long gap. Like, take it back to its roots while at the same time showing us something different, and the fact that it's actually open and successful. I love that idea as a starting point for their sequel to Jurassic Park.
I agree. I think if you're going to come back, and this has always been my stance on sequels, legacy sequels, like, I really don't, there's a lot of people that kind of bemoan the existence of them, and I really don't mind, because it can be done really well when you try to find an angle. And I think for Jurassic Park World specifically, I think going to a functioning park is a direction, because at this point, they'd already done we're back on the abandoned island twice. We'd already done two different versions of that. One where we go back to the island sort of with the intention of doing almost a prequel to what we end up with here. We're capturing all the dinosaurs to take them back because we want to open a park again. And then 3, where we've got somebody stranded on the island and we go back. And I think both of those are, 3 in particular, I think is an effective way to find a way back to the park, especially with the nature of, of course somebody's going to be, of course there's some guy that's going to offer parasailing around an island with dinosaurs on it.
All right.
Because why wouldn't you want to make some money off of that? Corporate greed, folks. The running theme of Jurassic Park. But going to a functioning park for this, I think, was definitely the right angle to take, just to make it different, make it stand out, and make it feel like we've got something else to do. And I do agree with that decision.
First things first, we're going to talk about the cast of this film, starting with the high point, best casting and best performance of the movie. Every episode, we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. And we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off here. Who was getting a Mark Strong Award for Jurassic World?
I'm actually going to go, it's a smaller part, but I'm actually going to go with essentially the only returning cast member from the previous films. And near as I can tell, I think he's only in Jurassic Park. He's not in any of the others, I don't think. But I'm going B.D. Wong as Dr. Henry Wu. He is, like I said, our only returning cast member for this film. We do get some of some more OGs back in the later films. We'll talk about those when they come. But his role here is definitely evolved. In the first movie, he's definitely an actor who got more famous after Jurassic Park, because there was definitely an allure to bring him back. But his character in Jurassic Park is basically just an exposition machine. He just tells them a bunch of information about how they make the dinosaurs. So in this movie, he's obviously evolved as a character, and he's now basically the lead geneticist for Jurassic World. And he is essentially responsible for the creation of the Indominus Rex. Basically, they got tasked with finding something that was going to boost park attendance. And so he was like, make a scarier, nastier dinosaur. And he's... there's definitely a more sinister side to him this time around. I don't know if sinister is the right word.
I think it's
a darker edge.
Very interesting what they do with that. That's a great point, because he, like I said, in the original, he's just a scientist. Yeah, he obviously knows about the genetics, helped create him and everything. But here, he's clearly involved in shady, bad, dangerous stuff. But he hides behind his intellectualism to not feel guilty about it. He's like, well, this is just what you wanted. You're responsible for this. You orchestrated this. I just followed orders, you know? And but you know what you were doing, right? And whenever it's time to like pull the plug and evacuate, and he's very adamant about helping steal the specimen and keep the project going. So like he clearly has a hand in like the evil side of this, but
Right.
speaks as if he's above it. You know what I mean? It's
Or like it's necessary. Or like
Yeah.
like it's required. Like I think he says even at one point, if I don't innovate, somebody else will. So he's kind of taking that mindset of like somebody else will be there. He does give us our little their little get out of jail free card for explaining why the dinosaurs still look the same and haven't been updated to the because when Jurassic Park came out, the movie was lauded for its relative scientific accuracy in how dinosaurs look. Ensuing years have revealed that the dinosaurs, a lot of them were probably feathered, things of that nature. But Wu, at one point in this movie, does state that if many of the dinosaurs would look, quote, quite different if their genetic codes were pure. So they're giving themselves a little bit of an excuse there for keeping things looking the same. But
look,
yeah,
I know I'm watching the movie wrong, but Jurassic Park as a franchise has always been like, yeah, we fill in the gaps. This frog, they end up reproducing asexually, blah blah blah. But also, they're like, the paleontologists are like, oh wow, look at their behavior. This confirms all my theories, as if the
Even though
dinosaurs
it's
we're
not,
watching
yeah.
are behaving exactly like they would 65 million
Yeah.
years ago. They kind of had their cake and eat it too. I'm sorry, I'm watching the movie wrong, but just want to throw that out there.
It is true. It's a very excellent point. But either way, I do like seeing BD Wong here adding a little bit of that gravitas, as it were.
Gravitas. Gravitas.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going with. He's, like I said, he's a small part here, but I think he's very important. He maintains throughout the rest of these. He returns in, I believe, both of the sequels. Yeah, I like what he's doing here. I think it's an interesting way to take the character and adds in that kind of... Because, yeah, obviously the issue of the film is the Indominus Rex escaping, but they create this kind of more dangerous background. And Wu is a big part of that recurs throughout these three films. So, BD Wong, never sad to see him on my screen.
That's an excellent pick, Andrew. I friggin' love BD Wong anytime he shows up. I've talked about Law and Order SVU, I don't know how many times on this podcast, but I love the show. He used to be a major cast member. He's like a child psychologist on that show. And always, he's always playing like a scientist or a doctor. And I would believe you if you told me this man was like a genius or had a PhD or was genuinely as intelligent as his characters are, right? That ended up coming off kind of backhanded. But like, he plays the part so well, I wouldn't have been surprised if he was like actually a doctor that transitioned to film. You know what I mean? It seems so natural to him. But I love, anytime he shows up, I love him showing up here. He has a brief part in a movie called Stay, which is a movie no one has seen, but I like very much. And he shows up playing a very similar type of character there. And it's great. He sort of, Andrew, you and I have discussed, like, what is a legacy sequel exactly? And I think one of the checklist things is a returning character. And he's checking that box here, right? Like, it's got it's a long gap in the franchise. It's reintroducing ideas, but it's got to have that returning legacy character. And, this movie is very much in the era of The Force Awakens or Ghostbusters Afterlife. Like, it's kind of making this template of a legacy sequel to an established IP. And like I said, he's, in that regard, he's playing a very important part. But yeah, excellent pick. And definitely elevating the movie, I think, for sure. Providing that connective tissue. And he's just so darn good at what he does that I think it's a great pick, Andrew. I'm going a different direction. But I'm also going to go with somewhat of a bit part compared to most of our Mark Strong Award picks. But my pick is going to be Irfan Khan as Simon, the CEO of Jurassic World. It's a very interesting role because it's almost like, this movie has a big cast. You're introduced to a lot of characters. You have the operations manager, you have the science side, you have the security side, and then you have your CEO, and it's all like, who's really responsible for this happening. And it's almost like corporate greed and just corporate hierarchy with, it's a bunch of people that can point the finger at each other and no one's really wrong, no one's really right. It's like all these layers to this. Like, who's really responsible for creating this new dangerous dinosaur? And it's like, I don't know. You can make an argument for a few different people. One of them being the CEO, Simon Masrani. But he's not presented as a villain. In fact, it's really the opposite for me, which is why he's getting my Mark Strong Award. This movie, for a lot of it, it's a little gloomy. Some of the characters are, I mean, even like Chris Pratt, who's known as like funny guy, like that's really toned down in this movie. There's a lot of gloom and dire situations, and it can kind of run the risk of almost, again, being too gloomy and depressing. But like anytime he's on screen, he's just, if there's anybody that you believe like is doing this for the passion and love of dinosaurs, it's this guy. And I love his little side plot about like learning to pilot a helicopter, and he's so proud that he's about to get his license. And like, as a CEO of the giant company, you don't need to do that, but he's clearly like has this like hunger for life that is very infectious, and it stands out in this movie because of like the gloom and dark cloud that kind of hangs over all the other characters. And again, it doesn't quite paint him as a villain, but you could definitely point the finger at him, and I think you can kind of feel that too, kind of the burden and responsibility that he has. And he has this kind of heroic death where he's trying to save people, and his helicopter goes down, and it's a tragic end. But I don't want to speak too out of turn here, because I'm going to be completely honest with you. What the time I saw this movie, even now, like I don't know that much about Irfan Khan's work. I know he passed away. Big R.I.P. to Irfan Khan, because it was way too young and very tragic. But from what I understand, this man is a huge international star. Lots of high-profile gigs in Indian cinema, and just has a massive audience. And me personally, I've only seen him in a couple things, like this movie, Your Life of Pi. But the little bit I've been exposed to him, I can absolutely understand why he was such a big deal. He has like this innate charisma. He reminds me a bit of like Raul Julia. Like, just looking at his face, like you just feel this like chemistry, and you just instantly like the guy. He had just a real intangible quality there. So again, even though his screen time is rather limited, I love the character, I love the actor. Bringing up the entire movie for me, getting my Mark Strong Award.
I think this is a fantastic pick. I think his part is interesting because it shows that there can be this massive disconnect between the person at the top of a company and then the workings of that company. Because he literally told BD Wong, make something bigger and scarier for the park to drive up business. And then BD Wong filled in all the gaps himself to make something that ultimately was terrifying, and obviously was built with his own kind of nefarious agenda. Not nefarious necessarily, but definitely had some shady machinations going on there. But he's against it. And ultimately, he teams up with our heroes for the most part to try to evacuate the park, to try to save the day and try to help. And it is there that he meets his unfortunate demise. But yeah, Irfan Khan is tremendous. Everything I've seen him in, I like. He had a bit part in Amazing Spider-Man. That was another thing that was probably supposed to lead to something else, but never quite got there. But like you said, I looking at his filmography, it's insane. There's 3 to 4 movies a year, and sometimes 6 to 8 movies a year for like every year from 2002 through like 2018. And obviously he passes away of a very a specific form of cancer in 2020. But you can like even see that like through 2020, he's still working. Like, he's still got stuff that he's doing, pretty much stuff that came out even after he passed. And so just a great little bit part. Like I said, you could have easily taken this. You could have easily not had this role in the movie at all. But I think he brings a lot of life to the film and does the most with the limited screen time he has.
Let's take a look at the leads of the film, starting with Chris Pratt as Owen Grady. This is clearly like the the Alan Grant of the movie. I mean, he's not a paleontologist, but like he's got the distinctive like blue shirt with the jacket. He's got the distinctive like look, right? And he's doing this role where he's like a velociraptor trainer. Like it's just a very cool, like a new niche to have in the Jurassic Park world. And of course, the star of the film, as we talked about extensively, Chris Pratt's star was at an all-time high at this point. This possibly raised it even higher. And again, I think I mentioned this a second ago, like his usual shtick is played down. His goofiness and kind of man-child behavior that he became known for with things like Parks and Rec and Guardians of the Galaxy is played down. But there's still some lines that are supposed to be comedic or what have you. But otherwise, a more straightforward performance than we've seen previously from Chris Pratt.
And this was something that I think he was trying to branch out into at the time. He'd kind of done the lovable... Say what was the nice way? I was going to say the lovable idiot, but it's
that's
not really the nicest way of putting it. But was trying to branch out into some serious stuff, and there were some hits and some misses. Like obviously, this was a big hit. Stuff like Passengers, a little less so. Obviously, I remember he was in the Magnificent Seven remake, which I actually liked a good bit.
I saw that. I forgot about that. Yeah.
And so. Been was, like I said, really was blowing up at this point, was trying to kind of move beyond maybe some of his more stereotypical stuff and kind of find himself in some more straightforward things, and he definitely found them. But he the movie goes out of its way to tell you how cool this guy is, for lack of a better way to put it.
Did you see the way he drinks Coke out of a glass bottle?
Yeah, that's so cool, man.
That's cool.
So cool. But he's an ethologist, I think, which is somebody who studies animal behavior. So they're trying to kind of apply that to raptors, and he's basically working on whether or not raptors can take commands, which you got to wonder if that's going to be important later. But it's an interesting role. Like I said, he's kind of filling the Alan Grant, but definitely making it more of an action hero. He's actually kind of more like a little bit more like the guy from the first film whose name is completely slipping my mind right now. The one who's the raptor expert in the first film. He's probably more analogous to him than Alan Grant.
Girl.
Just exactly. Shooter! But like it's the same type of idea. Like he studied raptors, he understands them. Except this guy is not some middle-aged English dude. This is cool guy Chris Pratt.
And we have Bryce Dallas Howard as Claire Deering. Again, the operations manager. First, talk about just Bryce Dallas Howard outside of this movie. I'm a fan. I think she, when given the right material, really rises to the occasion. I am a defender of M. Night Shyamalan's The Village. To me, that was his last great movie before the streak was broken with the next one. A lot of people point to that one as the first misstep, but I'm a defender. I like it. And in no small part due to Bryce Dallas Howard being the lead of that film. I think she's excellent. And I believe that's like her debut, at least in like a leading role and not like a small cameo or anything. So she hits the ground running as far as I'm concerned. And I've seen her pop up in things here or there. I think she is just, again, a tremendous actor. Sometimes I see a movie she's in, I'm like, wow, she was really good. But it turns out that I was talking about Jessica Chastain. But whenever I keep them straight, whenever I actually realize it's her, I think she does a really good job. Hashtag PP, Andrew. This script doesn't give her a ton. It puts her in this box of like overworked woman with no time for a family. It's not a trope that I love. And I'm not sure if anyone could have elevated it really too much beyond what she does here. I know that doesn't sound very hashtag positivity podcast, but I also don't want to just like straight up, I'm not going to lie to you people. So I think the script lets her down, but I don't, if you have any problems with this character, I don't point to Bryce Dallas Howard's performance as the problem.
No, I agree. I do remember her from Spider-Man 3 briefly, an alum of the show then.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But
He's Gwen
adding
Stacy.
to the strange trend of Spider-Man movies where they take blondes and make them redheads and make the redheads blondes.
So specific, but so true.
It's half. If I had a nickel for every time, Chris, I'd have 15 cents, which is not a lot, but it's weird. It's happened 3 times. Yeah, and then, like I said, kind of slowly worked her way up. She was in Terminator Salvation, a couple of the Twilight films, working her way up until Jurassic World, which I think really is kind of her big blockbuster debut, kind of first big leading role in the front of like a major tentpole release, and has done some big stuff then. But even more recently, has gotten to the directing side of things a little bit. Directed some episodes of The Mandalorian, directed some episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. So starting to follow in her dad's footsteps to a degree. Because I don't know if you guys caught on to this, but her last name is Howard. And
and her middle name is Dallas, Andrew. You know the reasoning behind that?
The show?
It's apparently from Ron Howard naming his kids after where they were created.
Ron, that's gross.
It's weird. It's weird.
I don't think that's true because his other children's names do not include location. Because he's got Bryce Dallas Howard, he's got twins Jocelyn Carlisle
It's on
and
IMDb.
Paige Carlisle. Oh, well, I guess maybe. Their middle names are the same. What a ridiculous thing to make known to your children.
Howard names all his children after the place they were conceived. For me, it was a city. For my sisters, it was a hotel, Carlisle. My brother, his middle name was Cross after a place we used to live. That was our road where our house was.
Oh, so she's saying this.
Yeah, my dad would make the joke, I didn't want to call him back of the Volvo.
Ron, I know you're listening. Clean it up for all of us, baby.
All right.
Oh my God! Wow!
Wow, that's weird. All right. Next, we have Vincent D'Onofrio as Vic Hoskins, head of security operations, and also kind of maybe has like this side deal with like government contracts where they're trying to prove that dinosaurs can be used as a bioweapon. And I mean, I love Vincent D'Onofrio anytime he shows up. My Mark Strong Award winner for the first Men in Black, which is really impressive when you look at who he's going up against in that movie. But good performance, good casting, I think, for this type of character. That kind of, in my opinion, rides a line between like good and bad. Maybe this is a me thing. I don't hate this character. I don't look at them as like a villain. I think we're supposed to, but I kind of understand where he's coming from even if I didn't like personally agree. Maybe that's a me thing. It's kind of like how I watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I don't hate Nurse Ratched. I think she's just like doing her job. I hate the system, but not her. Again, maybe a me thing, but
it's like how you watch The Founder and you don't think Ray Kroc did anything wrong.
Honestly, kind of. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say he doesn't do anything wrong. But I find that movie a little bit inspiring. I like a lot of what he does. The way what he did to the true founders, I think, is inexcusable. But
given that's the crux of the entire thing, yes.
Well, taking it away from them is kind of not fair. But like what he did to like establish that franchise and spread it, and the work and hustle he put into it, I find that a little bit inspiring. Again, probably a me thing. Probably a me thing, but
well, it's you threw in an important caveat, which is basically if you put aside the worst thing he did, it's a very inspiring story, which is true for most things. If you put aside the bad parts, all that's left is the inspiring parts. But no, this character. Back to the point at hand. I do love The Founder, folks. Great film. If you think a movie about McDonald's would be boring, you're only like 10% right. But it's also Laura Dern showing up in that one too. Big MVP. But yeah, he's back to Vincent. But he's got an interesting character here because I mean he's definitely comes off like sleazy. Like just the way he acts as a person is off-putting to me, where I'm just like, dude, you're that guy at a party where I'm like, can you not talk for 30 seconds and just spare us? But
I think it's the way he's up front the entire time. He doesn't have ulterior motives the entire time. He's like, look at these raptors. They can be weapons. That's the goal. That's why you're here. That's what we want to do. It's not like he pretends to be someone's friend and like, oh, this is actually about, learning their behavior. The entire time, he's like, yep, those are potential weapons, and I can't wait to use them as such. Up front, not lying.
He's very straightforward. I mean, don't get me wrong. Being up front doesn't inherently mean that it's noble, but he's surface level. There's not a lot beneath this character. He knows what he's doing, and when everything goes wrong, he's the one that's kind of right on the forefront, ready to throw things into action. Obviously, the plan does not come to pass because our boy BD Wong is withholding important information from our people, like. Literally, like, I love the thing is escaped. It's rampaging around. It's killing people. And they're like, what's in that thing? And he's like, I'm not at liberty to say. And it's like, bro. Bro. And unfortunately, Vic ends up becoming a victim of one of the raptors he sought to weaponize, possibly proving his own hypothesis. But again, never going to be sad to see Vincent D'Onofrio on my screen. He is fantastic, and I'm excited that he gets to come back again as Kingpin for one more round with our boy Charlie Cox.
Let's talk about the kiddos in this film. May as well talk about them together. We have Ty Simpkins playing Gray and Nick Robinson as his older brother, Zach, who are pretty much always on screen together and kind of share their storyline throughout the movie. I think it's, you talk about Jurassic World being a legacy sequel, bringing it back to its roots, bringing it back to the park. You've got to have kids involved. That's just part of the Jurassic Park formula. And I think this is great casting and a great storyline throughout. And instead of in previous movies where it's like an adult learning to bond with the kids, it's two brothers learning to take care of each other, mainly Zach learning to look after his younger brother. Because at the beginning of the movie, he's a little bit too cool to be hanging around him. And by the end, they're risking their lives together and working together. And
bonding through trauma.
Yes, the Hollywood classic. But I think, again, great casting in both cases. Ty Simpkins, I know from the Insidious films, he's great and creepy there. Continues to be great here. And I think Nick Robinson is just a perfect, I don't mean this backhanded, but he's kind of the stereotypical teenager who's too cool for like a family vacation. And well, parents are getting divorced, but whatever, you get 2 Christmases. And I'm okay with saying it's stereotypical because it's also pretty true. There's a lot of teenagers that act that way. So I think it's true to life. So it's okay to be a little bit stereotypical there. But again, 2 great performances. I think they totally hold their own when they have a lot of scenes where it's just them and the dinosaurs.
I agree. Nick Robinson's really great. I remember him from Love, Simon, which was a film he was the lead in. He was a big... which was just a great charismatic performance. And then Ty Simpkins, like you said, Iron Man 3, can't miss a chance to talk about the greatest of the Iron Man films. And obviously Ty Simpkins actually coming back for one more round in the Insidious universe, as we have established. Insidious 5 coming soon, bringing back Patrick Wilson and Ty Simpkins to the franchise, and directed by Patrick Wilson this time around.
Nice.
So I'm actually oddly hyped for that. Because can it be a legacy sequel to Insidious? Has it been long enough? But
not sure it's checking all the boxes.
No, definitely not. But yeah, they're both really good in their roles. They're both really good at kind of being in these spaces. And like you said, you're kind of starting off with Ty Simpkins' character is kind of like, on the surface level, he's like, oh, we're going to Jurassic World, but he's the one that's all really broken up on the inside about his parents divorcing. And, he says, oh, you get 2 Christmases now. And he's like, but I don't want 2 Christmases. And stuff like that is just such a small line that I think packs a big punch. Because like like you said, there's that stereotype of just like, your parents are getting divorced, you get two of everything now. But like, what if you don't want two of everything? It's some good stuff there from Ty Simpkins. And like you said, the older brother, Nick Robinson, doing some great stuff there. Like you said, he starts off being too cool for school. He's like trying to impress girls, doesn't want to be seen with his younger brother, just thinks it's awkward and weird. And by the end of the film, it's just like, nah, we're in this together. We're sticking by. And even like at one point before it all goes wrong, he's like, we're going to go off road. We're going to go off track. We're going to have some fun and see some stuff. And yeah, great chemistry between the two of them. Works really well.
All right, those are definitely our main players. We've got to hit up a few of these smaller roles here because they do a lot with them. Like Jake Johnson showing up as apparently his character's name is Lowry. I really don't even remember them saying that, but you remember he shows up and you're like, that's Jake Johnson.
Yeah.
Who
playing Jake Johnson.
Yes. And forgive, I know he's got like a following. New Girl, right? Is the show he's from? Okay.
Yeah.
And an alum of the show, a Mark Strong Award winner, I think, from The Mummy, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. Also, obviously, our Peter B. Parker from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Another
right.
Giving slightly overweight men the cosplay costume they've been waiting for. And then obviously Thor giving the larger male characters their cosplay they needed. Yeah, I love that his name is not just Lowry. His name is Lowry Crothers, which sounds like a law commercial you'd see on late night television. Call the law offices of Lowry Crothers. If we don't win, you don't pay. I
am absolutely fascinated with this character, though. Not a lot of screen time, but very memorable. He's wearing a Jurassic Park t-shirt, which in this universe means he's wearing a t-shirt from the park that was doomed to fail before it ever started. He mentions he got this shirt off of eBay. And the entire purpose of his character is how Jurassic Park was actually better. And like, you just need dinosaurs. We don't need to genetically modify dinosaurs. We don't need Verizon Presents and all this corporate stuff. Like the beauty is just the dinosaurs and keeping it simple. And he's disregarded by most people. They're always like brushing him off and grow up and you're immature. And Andrew, I gotta say, I'm not sure what the message is supposed to be, but when I saw this in theaters, I was thinking like, okay, they tapped some young up-and-coming writer to write a Jurassic Park sequel, and they didn't really want to do it because they didn't think the movie needed sequels. So they snuck this character in whose whole purpose is to be like, yeah, we got to make this new, bigger, better movie, but really the original's where it's at and it's never going to be topped. Like, that's the message that I get from this guy. And again, in universe, he's talking about the park, but from an audience perspective, he's talking about the movies themselves, and it seems pretty transparent to me. And I'm kind of fascinated by this character existing in this film.
Yeah, he sits in a very strange space. Like, it's just a very odd, like, he just believes in like the original concept of Jurassic. I mean, his character is basically a Jurassic Park superfan. Like, he's got dinosaurs on his desk. He's got Ian Malcolm's book. He's got all of this stuff that just it's like literally he's that fan. He's the fan who was like the original was better. And that's the existence he has in this movie. And even like the last act of his character is to release the big dinosaur from the first movie. Like that's the last thing he does in this film. Like that's his role, is to basically be this weird like physical manifestation of the original Jurassic Park, which is interesting to me because one of the themes of the original Jurassic Park is how they should not be doing what they're doing for the sake of like corporate profits. Like it's literally like you're playing God to make money, and that's bad. And we've come so far from that concept now. It's to when you were playing God the first time, it was better than when you were playing God this time. Like it's all the same at the end of the day. But also I think there's an interesting aspect that his character romanticizes the original Jurassic Park, possibly more than he should.
That's a good
because
point.
first off, the park never existed. It never saw people. It's actually funny to me that like the logo exists on a shirt on eBay. Well, first off, dude, you bought a bootleg. It's not OG. Some dude just screen printed it on a shirt and you paid for it, which is fine. We all do it. Sometimes we have to. But also the idea that because it wasn't real and because it never opened, you can attach kind of whatever you want to that as a fan. And that's kind of what I also think is another layer to his character that I intentional or not, I think that's an aspect of it that's also to be considered, is that, what happened at Jurassic Park? It went wrong and a bunch of people died. Like, it's not something that you should be jazzed about. It's not something you should be like, oh man, this was really, it was really sweet the first time where, there were no visitors and only people died, versus this time where it's different. So, hashtag PP, but he's a very strange character to have in this film because I feel like he represents a lot of different things. And it's Jake Johnson, so he's playing Jake Johnson as all of these things. So
yeah,
it makes it charismatic and funny, at least.
We should mention Lauren Lapkus, who plays Vivian, who's also in the control room with him, and his coworker, who again is one of the people that kind of doesn't entertain his nostalgic rants.
Yeah.
Which is where most of her screen time is coming from, their interaction. But also, she seems to have a connection with Irfan Khan's character of Simon, and is the one who has the big reaction to his death. She's pretty torn up about that and gets to, show be the audience surrogate for the sadness that happens when he dies. And I think she does a good job at that. Lauren, very distinct looking actor. Can't miss her. I recognize her from Orange is the New Black. She's in season 3, 4, somewhere around there, one of the prison guards, and has a memorable role there. She does a great job. So, love her anytime she shows up.
Yeah, absolutely. She's a good contrast to, she's the kind of more analytical person that focuses kind of on the job at hand versus Jake, who kind of romanticizes things. Fun little moment there where he goes in for the kiss and she's like, no, stop. No, don't do that. I
have a boyfriend. You misread this.
You misread this. And to Jake Johnson's credit, I think he's like, oh, no, okay. All right.
He handles it well.
Which you should do, folks.
He handles the rejection better than Chris Pratt does in this movie.
He does. Lesson for Hollywood, folks. But yeah, fun performance. And like I said, she's always a highlight.
And then I just got to mention, it's very small roles, but like the parents of our two kids, who you see briefly in the very beginning of this movie and then again at the end, are played by Judy Greer and Andy Buckley, who Judy Greer has a thriving career on her own. Andy Buckley, if you've seen The Office, you know him as David Wallace on The Office. So again, they're very small. If they weren't who they were, I wouldn't even be bringing them up right now, but I thought it was interesting. Yeah. I thought for sure they would show up like bigger roles by the end of the movie or in a sequel, but that never happens. But
nope.
They went hard for those small parts.
They did. Two other small things I want to shout out. Omar Sy showing up as Barry, Owen's assistant. Just always like seeing Omar Sy on my screen. And Brian T., alum of the show from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, Shredder himself, showing up briefly as Hamada, the leader of the asset containment unit, who gets viciously torn apart by the Indominus Rex.
He does. All right, Andrew, that's our cast. Let's jump into the scenes of this film. Are we going to start with the best scene, or at least our personal favorite? So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders, and what is the best scene in Jurassic World?
I got to go with our big final dino brawl at the end of this film. Basically, the Indominus, the park has been mostly evacuated. We are essentially down to Zach, Gray, Owen, and Claire are kind of face-to-face with the Indominus Rex. And this leads to Chris Pratt kind of regaining his connection with the Raptors, and the Raptors attack the Indominus, but they mostly get overpowered, and then they're kind of just biding their time until I think it's Gray has the very odd realization they need more teeth. So, weird way to say that, kid. But this leads to Claire running and getting. We'd all been waiting for it. I don't think it shows up in the film at all to that point.
Yeah.
I don't think so. They save it, but she's standing in front of a giant set of doors. She tells Jake Johnson's Lowry Crothers, attorney at law, to open up the paddock doors. And she's holding a giant flare. And you all know where it's going. There's no question. The minute she lights the flare, it opens up and they play the music swell. And it's the T-Rex coming back. And so she's running in high heels. Again, strange thing to focus on. Runs back and basically brings us the real big fight that this movie never really promised, but you kind of assumed it was leading to. The Indominus versus the T-Rex. And we get a pretty smackdown brawl-out fight between those two where the T-Rex starts to look like it's getting overpowered, and then one of the raptors, Blue, who does recur throughout the rest of the films, reappears, teams up with the T-Rex, confirming all my personal paleological theories about the working relationships between raptors and T-Rexes.
Yes.
Nice to be vindicated. But able to turn the tide slightly, and then the Mosasaurus coming in for the big kill jumps right over the rail at its own enclosure.
You gotta wonder why it's suddenly able to do that.
Jumps up, swallows the thing down, and as such, the Indominus is defeated. Blue kind of runs off back into the ground, and the T-Rex is kind of like, all right, bye. And this kind of is the big finale of our film. But just big, dumb dino fights in action. I gotta say, the nostalgia with the T-Rex definitely worked. It was a cool moment. The T-Rex facing down with the Indominus Rex. And it's the moment in the movie where like everything else just goes out of my head and I'm just watching it and I'm enjoying it. I'm sure that if I thought critically about it for a second, I would be like, that doesn't make any sense. But I just love it. It's big dinosaur action, all different types. Obviously, we get the raptors in on it. We got the T-Rex. We got the Indominus. And then we got the Mosasaurus coming in too. That's something that this movie... I mentioned that one of the things I liked about Jurassic Park 3 was the addition of extended pteranodon sequences, flying dinosaurs. This one goes a little bit and starts giving us the sea dinosaurs, which is something that the movies had kind of not really used to this point. I'm guessing, again, it's a technology thing. This
and it's
movie
terrifying. That's the scariest dinosaur in this movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, the
thing
Mosasaurus,
frightens
it is massive. It is
Yes.
massive. It is terrifying. And there is very possibly something that size still dwelling at the bottom of our oceans, folks.
Ugh. Ugh. No, that freaks me out. Like, I think it's really cool. There's the scene that's introduced is like it's like a SeaWorld-esque event where the crowd is watching it and the crowd gets lowered to see it like in its tank. I would be terrified. Like, just to see something that massive. Like, God, when I see those pictures of like someone swimming alongside a blue whale, freaks me out. Like, I know they're probably not in danger. I know like blue whales don't eat people, but like just something that large just absolutely terrifies me. I don't know what it is. It's I follow this subreddit called thalassophobia, like a fear of like deep water. I don't think I actually have that fear, but again, some of those images, something about a giant living creature like that freaks me the hell out, especially when it's, bloodthirsty like the one we have here. So absolutely terrifying. Andrew, it's a great pick for favorite scene though. We both erroneously mentioned that BD Wong is the only returning cast member, but the T-Rex comes back.
Chris, shut up.
I'm not a big enough Jurassic Park fan to understand this, I guess, but like something about the scars that it has is supposed to prove to us that it's the same T-Rex from the first movie, which I don't know if it just had scars in the first movie or like it's from the Velociraptor attack. I don't know what the lore is exactly, but something about the scars are supposed to signify to us that it's not just a T-Rex, but the T-Rex from the original. And I like that final fight. I like that it comes down to a dino fight because that's something that they've done before in the franchise, but not too much of. Like, the T-Rex kind of accidentally saves them at the end of the first one, but
Yeah.
it's really more like a distraction so they can run away.
Right.
It's not so much about the fight itself. And then Jurassic Park 3, you have the Spinosaurus kill the T-Rex, but again, it's like a one and done thing, and then we move on. So having an extended fight between dinosaurs, pretty interesting, feels pretty fresh for the franchise. To me, the scene is about nature balancing itself out. Even though
Right.
these are all genetically modified, shouldn't exist anyway creatures, the fact that it's the OG quote unquote dinosaurs taking out this like abomination they've created, like the enemy is my enemy is a friend type of thing. You just need Ken Watanabe there to say, let them fight. Right? And then
Yeah.
it's gonna work
Yeah.
itself out, and it does. So yeah, great pick, Andrew. Personally, I'm going to go a different direction, but I am going to go with another action set piece. I think this movie is shining.
You're going Jimmy Buffett?
No, actually, I'm going the other Jimmy cameo. I like the gyro ball scene. That's my favorite of the movie. But it is funny. There's two small cameos in this movie, both Jimmys.
If we had a nickel for every guy named Jimmy who cameoed in this movie, we'd have 10 cents. Again, not a lot, but it's weird it happened twice.
It is a little bit weird. I like, again, I mentioned earlier, the smartest thing this thing does is take it back to a park, specifically an open theme park, and seeing, what do these rides look like? What's the attraction? And I was reading about this movie. I don't think it explicitly gives us a year in the film, but apparently it's supposed to be like the year it came out, 2015. But to me, it feels like a not too distant future type scenario where the technology is a little bit beyond what we have, but still, we can understand how we could get there, like all the holograms and everything. But these gyro balls are cool. You kind of it's almost like a lazy river, but it's through a field of dinosaurs that should be harmless. I love the little peek into like this technology and what the ride would look like. And I really like this Jimmy Fallon cameo. I'm a fan of Jimmy Fallon. I like his show all right. I watch a lot of the highlights, like the games that he plays, and I think he's kind of funny. A lot of people hate that he laughs at his own jokes, but you know what? I do that too, so I can't get mad at someone else for doing that.
That's true. That is true. Laugh at your own jokes, folks.
But I like how like over the top and goofy that little video is. Like it's the type of corny entertainment that you see in amusement parks. I think it's like a really well done parody, genuinely, and I like that. But of course, the scene evolves to be an action scene, and that's really what's putting it over the top for me. He wants to cheer his younger brother up, and they're supposed to be taking the ride back in because they're closing that part of the park. But he decides to go out of the containment because a gate was left open. We don't know, or they don't know why, but we see that it's actually leading to danger. But they leave the safe area and end up witnessing another dino fight as the Indominus Rex comes by and wrecks shop. It then starts trying to eat them in this gyro ball. And a hallmark of the Jurassic Park franchise is like these tight claustrophobic scenarios where you're like, oh my God, that is terrifying. How are they going to escape? It's like the Jeep, the kids being stuck in the Jeep in the first movie as the T-Rex is trying to break in. It's them in this glass gyro ball. The tooth is breaking through the glass. It's a matter of time. And sure enough, they're able to escape right before he cracks that thing like an egg. It's thrilling. It's well done, as a lot of the action scenes are. But the reason I picked this one as my favorite is, again, just seeing an operational park is this movie's biggest strength. And we get the best of both worlds here.
I agree. I think this is a good pick because the gyro balls is a new thing too for the film. Obviously, like the original park was meant to be like a guided, like car on a track type situation. This is definitely something that you would see in like the idea of a park where you just kind of get to move around. And it was a cool new piece of technology. Created some interesting set pieces, like you said, including the one with Indominus. And cool stuff.
Also, excellent casting. Micro Mark Strong Award to the ride operator here. The teenager who clearly just has like a summer job doing this gyro. Like,
yeah. And I've seen that guy before.
Casting.
I have seen that guy before.
He plays just like teenager, right? He's got the long shaggy hair. He clearly like he does his job. He's not passionate about it. He's completely lost when he has to turn people away. He's like, guys, I just work here. He's like the teen from The Simpsons who always has a job, like the fast food restaurant or whatever. Just
Yeah.
the most stereotypical nerdy teen. But I love that casting there. It's so good.
He is apparently a gentleman named Matty Carteropel. Also was in Stranger Things as the manager at Family Video. So,
Perfect.
Also in Free Guy, bunch of other things too. So, yeah.
He's found his niche and he's running with it. Love it. Love it.
And I guess also we can shout out Colin Trevorrow himself cameoing as the voice of Mr. DNA.
Yet another legacy character, Mr. DNA.
Chris! I swear to God!
I like all the little callbacks. I like seeing the original Jeeps. I like seeing Mr. DNA. I know this is a concept that some people have gotten tired of in legacy sequels. And I know, like, South Park has mercifully made fun of it with, like, the member berries. Like, oh, remember this, remember this, remember this. But I think it's all used very well here. Like, Mr. DNA, blink and you miss it. You see him on a screen as we're panning by. The lab being named after John Hammond. Like, there's a lot of little callbacks that are just... They make it feel in the same universe, which I think is actually important. And yeah, it's probably partly there to tap into our nostalgia. I mean, like, there's no real reason for them, like, to pick up the night vision goggles from the first movie as the theme is being played on a piano. I get that they're weaponizing our nostalgia. Okay, I'm not obtuse to that, but I also think it generally works from a story perspective and for, setting this in the same universe. I think there is a purpose to all of that. So yeah, bring on Mr. DNA. Let's see him again.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I sent you that GIF earlier of Don Draper from Mad Men, who says nostalgia. It's delicate but potent, and yeah. It's accurate in a way, but at the same time, it really can like add something to it. Like I remember watching the Top Gun Maverick trailers and having that weird little piano version, the original Top Gun theme playing in that trailer. I'm not gonna lie not even gonna pretend that didn't hit for me, where I was like, oh man, it means we're back, but this time it's more serious. Like it's ridiculous, but I knew that's what it meant. And I think generally speaking, I agree with you that I think most of the iconography they're using from the original is used pretty well. I think, and I guess that's a personal preference thing. I mean, and it's a balance. I think it's always a balance. I've definitely watched movies where they went really heavy on it, and I was like, all right, I get it. I definitely have seen movies where I was definitely by the end of it like, all right, I understand. There were previous movies in this franchise. And then there's been other times where it's just mostly fun. And I think here it mostly falls into the fun category. The story they're telling is not held back by endless references, which is, I think, the key. If you're going to put in references and stuff, it's fine, but it needs to not kill the pace or slow the story you're telling down just to be like, hey, remember this thing? And I don't think this movie falls into that too much.
Speaking of just seeing an operational park, I think it's cool saying the SeaWorld-esque stage show and the gyro ball. The one that might have excited me the most is the dino petting zoo. They kind of just pan by it at one point, but there's a bunch of kids walking into a petting zoo like we all know, but it's little baby dinosaurs walking around. That's what I wanted to do the most. If I could do anything in this movie, I want to just walk into a petting zoo, a bunch of little baby dinosaurs, and go and pet them all. That one excited me the most. One day when we have a dinosaur park, that's the attraction I want to go to.
Yeah, definitely. There are a great many animals that I would like to just be able to sit with, and dinosaurs are on that list. I've recently found the joy of watching golden snub-nosed monkeys eat food. And I'm just like, I just want to feed this guy oranges. I just want to do that. And with dinosaurs, I want to do the same thing. I just want to feed this guy berries. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I like too. Just it's a giant park. You're not going to focus on every piece of it, but they make a point to show other things that are happening in it. I'm sure if I went in with even more eagle eyes when they show like the maps and stuff, you would probably see other things and other little bits and pieces of the park too. But obviously, we don't go back to the park after this because there is no park after this. And it's funny. It's there's this thing I've recently noticed with myself where even if I'm watching a fictional animal go through duress, it makes me uncomfortable. And I don't know where this has come from, but I really noticed it when I was watching Avatar 2. There's an extended, for lack of a better word, whaling sequence in that film. It's not a real whale. It's not even a real animal. But the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, this is really in depth. It's making me uncomfortable. And watching these movies, the one thing I will say is I did not feel that about watching Indominus Rex get destroyed at the end of this. It's like, nope, you deserve that.
No, but seeing the long neck dying felt like a live action Land Before Time. Like,
it
right?
did.
It's laying there.
I certainly hope there's no more dying long necks in these movies, Chris.
Andrew, I haven't seen the sequels, but I don't like where this is going. But the scene where Grady is just trying to comfort it as it dies. It's sad. And then the camera pans out and you see there's like a field of all of them dying. It's
Trevorrow, who hurt you? Who? Tell me who, and I will personally go make them pay so that you don't do this to me anymore.
Yeah, it we've talked about how the sort of majestic nature of the dinosaurs, of seeing dinosaurs on film or the character seeing them in a park, is gone after that first movie. Like, because how can it not be? After that grand introduction of dinosaurs in the first movie, you can't just keep doing that. Like, it's just that feeling isn't there. So much so that the opening of this movie, it starts with a dinosaur. It starts with the raptor hatching out of an egg. Like, there's no big long build up to seeing dinosaurs. It's like, you've seen them before. Here's a baby one hatching. Let's go. And again, that's kind of a theme of the movie, that like the awe-inspiring nature of dinosaurs is worn off, which is why they're creating new, more dangerous dinosaurs to get people interested again. So there's some interesting parallels being played with there. But bringing that scene where you see them dying, I don't know the word, I almost said humanizes them. It doesn't humanize them, but feeling empathy for them, feeling something by seeing a dinosaur, even if it is sadness, I think is still an accomplishment of the movie.
I agree. I think that, and obviously I'll say it's a thing that Avatar succeeds at, just being able to be able to create empathy for a fictional creature, I think is something that is, definitely something to be said. This movie definitely hits both sides of it, where I see fictional dinosaurs going through duress and I'm sad. And then I watch the mean dinosaur that did all of it get his just desserts. And I'm like, yes! Yes! Drag him into the water and eat him.
You do see a T-Rex before that finale. I'm looking at my notes here, and they do show it to us once. And again, it's one of the parts where, like, I love seeing an operational theme park and like what would a dinosaur theme park look like. And they're looking at the T-Rex from a fake log. It's like a tunnel that you walk through, but in the T-Rex habitat, it's a big log with a window in it. And all the kids are looking out the window, seeing a T-Rex eat. And it's obscured a lot. They are saving the big reveal for the very end, because our too cool for school teenager, like on the phone, while in the background something very exciting is happening with the T-Rex, but he's so desensitized, theme in the movie, etc., etc. But again, you do see a T-Rex, again, from a fake log, that corny kind of stuff you see at the zoo, right? Where you crawl into like a fake hollow log or a tunnel to see the fish or whatever. I love seeing that incorporated here.
Yeah, I dig it.
I guess we should talk a little bit about this Indominus Rex, Andrew. Hashtag PP. It's not my favorite plot point, like creating a brand new dinosaur, but I like a lot of the like the camouflage. Like, I think it looks really cool. I just like, from a visual perspective and from like a new enemy type perspective, I think some of the abilities that they give it are pretty cool. I mean, essentially it just looks like a giant raptor. Like, they're not getting too ambitious, I think, with the design, but But there's some cool aspects to it. It's scary. I mean, I wouldn't want to come across it.
No, absolutely not. I think because the way they describe it is that the T-Rex is used as the base genome. Then the Velociraptor DNA was added for intelligence. Giganotosaurus DNA was added for the size. And then they even mentioned that like there's cuttlefish in there and other stuff like that, where there's all these different pieces coming together to give it all its abilities. Because like it can regulate its temperature so that it doesn't show up on heat scans, and like it can regulate like its heart rate so that it appears dead. And it's all these things that give us these like terrifying abilities and absolutely make it this like absolutely nasty creature that you just absolutely wouldn't want to encounter. But that's one of the recurring things is they're trying to hide that it's part raptor. It's this weird thing where like they, like I said, Henry Wu is like playing real coy about what's in this thing. And then as they keep running into these situations, it keeps getting revealed all the pieces of it until it culminates in the Indominus being able to communicate with the raptors and basically have the raptors turn on the human. Which, you know, awful. But it's but it's a genuine like twist where it's like, oh no, but like, you know, you think about the things you would put together to make it terrifying, and yeah, it's terrifying. And they even say fully grown it would be bigger than a T-Rex. This Indominus Rex is not fully grown. It is not. It would be even bigger if it had gotten a chance to continue to exist, but thankfully they stomped it out before that happened.
It's definitely the most horror whenever the Velociraptors do turn on the humans, because you see a lot of violence, but on like security cams, on body cams of the crew that's out there. And again, it gives it a horror vibe. It's almost scary. Like I feel like you see it that way because it's less violent to see it on grainy footage, but it makes it scarier to see like a first person perspective in a friggin' Velociraptor jumping at you, and then, you know, it turns to static. So I thought that was a pretty effective but PG-13 way to show the carnage.
I think it reminds me of Aliens a little bit. There's a sequence in Aliens where they're fighting a bunch of aliens, and that's how it's happening. Is they're like at the screen and people's cameras are just going to static as they're being attacked, and it just creates a really unsettling atmosphere. And I remember the idea of the Indominus Rex being really criticized by a lot of people for the same reason. There's the story. You know, Jake Johnson's character is making the same argument in the movie that, you know, you've got real dinosaurs. Why do you have to make fake ones? I was like, well, you know, the whole point of Jurassic Park, at least the original book, is that it's deeply irresponsible. Like, that's the entire point, is that what they're doing is not something they should be doing. And, you know, when you start talking about profits and changing things up and everything, like, I'm not shocked at all that a corporation would be like, better create something new that gets people excited again. So that part makes perfect sense to me. None of that really shocked. In fact, if anything, I was like, that seems like a logical place to take these movies, is that, oh, the actual dinosaurs aren't selling tickets anymore. Make me some new ones. And that's something the rest of these movies definitely play with that concept going forward, which...
I think the idea has always been, if mankind can, then mankind will. And so I can definitely see that argument that it's a logical place for the movies to go.
And yet, I still haven't gotten Dread 2.
We have the ability. Carl Urban's still around. Let's make the movie.
Somebody's got money. Come on. There's a fun little moment. I'm actually on the Rexy Jurassic Park fandom wiki page, which definitely does imply that the T-Rex from the OG and the T-Rex in Jurassic World are the same. But there is a sequence where when they're setting up for the final fight here, the T-Rex bursts through and crushes a Spinosaurus skeleton as a cheeky little way to poke fun at the Spinosaurus killing the T-Rex from Jurassic Park 3, which was apparently a scene that received some backlash. Interesting, but I thought it was fun to switch it up, but I guess people didn't want to see it kill a T-Rex. But it's a fun little cameo. Not even a cameo, Andrew. That's not the right word. That was a fun little Easter egg.
I mean, I gotta say, hashtag PP. I think we've praised, hit some high points. There's lots to like here. I'm not denying that. Overall, I don't think my feelings have changed too much about the movie, but I'm glad I rewatched it because there's definitely if you're doing a Jurassic Park marathon, don't skip this movie. All the usual stuff there. Like it's not. I mean, like we said, it's well received, so I don't really need to go out on a limb and defend it or anything. But personally, I think my feelings kind of stay the same. But the best things I can say about this movie is there's some really cool ideas here. I like going back to a park, like an operational park. I like the themes of old versus new. One thing we don't really talk about much is that like the dinosaurs here for the first time in the franchise are basically all CG. Even that initial shot with the Velociraptor coming out of the egg, it's all CG. It's like telling you from the beginning, like, this isn't your grandpa's Jurassic Park or whatever. And they made some animatronics, but then they replaced them in post with CG. They end up being like just a reference, basically. So there might be some scattered shots of something practical, but by and large, the first time again, all CG dinosaurs. I think this technology is there to make it look good enough. But and I don't think that's a bad thing. I know, again, people our age and older, people that were around to see some of the more practical movies being made, kind of have a nostalgia and attachment to that. I don't think it's a matter of better or worse, just different. And I think this movie pulls off its dinosaurs. We see some scenes that we wouldn't see otherwise without that technology. So you've got to give it props for that. So good ideas, good themes. Casting and execution is something for everyone to decide for themselves. But again, I think there's some good stuff, good ideas here.
Yeah, like stuff like the Mosasaurus. You're not going to be able to do that practically. It's not happening. So there's definitely places where that technology has come through and made things possible. So I agree. But yeah, cool innovations with the park. Great dinosaur stuff, and the story with some interesting layers.
Well, Andrew, that concludes the section of this franchise that I've seen previously. It's new territory from here. There's 2 movies left this month: Fallen Kingdom and Dominion, movies that I know very little about. I've just seen like a trailer for each of them, so excited to see where they go after this, and I guess how they conclude it. It's my understanding of Dominion that it is like definitively the last movie until the inevitable reboot or whatever, so I don't know. New territory ahead. Excited to see what happens.
I've seen Fallen Kingdom and Dominion, and based off of the ending of Dominion, there is nothing about it that would like preclude them making another Jurassic Park movie.
Okay,
then. There's nothing in the movie where you're like, oh, I guess we've closed the book on this. Not even from like a story perspective. Like, you can always go back. Like, if you can come back from the events of Jurassic Park to get to Jurassic World, there's no reason you can't just do that again. Like, it's
sure, yeah.
enough.
Dinosaur movies will continue until morale improves.
Give me my Dino Riders movie, you cowards.
All right, well, before we jump into those 2 movies, though, of course, it's time for the question of the week. If you want to leave us a question, you can. Just hop into our Discord. There's a link in the show notes. There's a channel there for you to drop a question, just like that guy in Doom did. And Andrew, here's the question they ask. What would be your perfect movie? You both throw around GOAT lots to show love of actors in movies. Okay, hang on. First of all, we throw it around a lot, like we don't mean it. Okay, Jake Gyllenhaal is definitively the greatest actor of all time. As is Michael Keaton. As is Idris Elba. As is everyone else we said it about.
As is Jeff Goldblum.
I don't know what's confusing about this. But they continue.
When you subscribe to the theory of quantum mechanics, there is no one universe. So everyone is simultaneously the GOAT.
But a perfectly executed movie. Cream of the crop. Best of the best. And they say, for me, it's A Knight's Tale. Absolutely perfect movie. What's yours? Andrew, I gotta be honest. I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking of some movies. A Knight's Tale was not the first movie to pop into my head.
No.
Not a crazy take, though. That movie's so much fun. So. I love it.
The first movie that popped into my head is Memento.
Hell yeah.
I think from an execution perspective, I think that movie nails what it's doing. It's auspicious, it sticks the landing, but at the same time, the stakes are low compared to Nolan's later filmography. I do like most of his movies, but Memento is the one in my head where I'm like, it's. I don't want to say it's Christopher Nolan at his peak, because obviously there's lots of stuff he did after that was great. But I think it was where he found who Christopher Nolan was. And I think the movie itself is probably still my personal favorite of his entire filmography. Nothing is wasted. Everything comes together. It's a fantastic cast that all know their roles. Like I said, it's an auspicious concept, but it is used immensely effectively. And when I think of movies that 100% stick the landing, have a great cast, execute the concept, and just a movie where I'm very hard pressed to find a flaw at all, Memento is usually in the forefront of my head.
Yeah, excellent pick. I usually call that my favorite movie of all time. So of course I'm going to agree with you. Perfectly executed. Like you were alluding to there, it uses a very distinct editing method, and it presents it to you in an interesting way. That could be a gimmick, but to me isn't. To me it fuels the narrative of the film, and that's like a little magic trick the movie does that I think is, like you said, executed perfectly. Perfect movie. Another movie I throw around as my favorite of all time is Reservoir Dogs. I also think that's executed perfectly. It's very similar in their filmography. It's technically not either director's first movie, but it may as well be their first movie. And it's like the perfect foundation, like a blueprint for what they build upon in later movies. Also a nonlinear narrative, but used effectively. Jewelry heist where you don't see the jewelry heist. Very fun. Perfect movie. Aside from my favorites, though, another one that does come to mind, which is genuinely one of my favorite movies, is gonna be Green Room, the A24 film about the punk band. You've seen this one, Andrew?
Yeah. Yes.
I think this movie is absolutely perfect. It anytime someone's looking for a movie recommendation, this is near the top of my list, especially for like a thriller or action movie. It is, again, relatively low stakes, limited setting. It is visceral and violent, but not in bloody and guts for the sake of blood and guts way. It's the gore you see is relatively limited, but very impactful. And I love, again, it's based around a punk band, and it just the script feels punk rock, and it's just so effective. Patrick Stewart shows up in against type role, and he nails it. And it has one of my favorite final lines in a movie ever. I won't waste it here. I won't spoil it for you. But if you've seen it, that very last scene, very last line is a perfect way to end that movie. And I would call that a perfect film. Green Room. Love it.
I agree. It's very, very good. There's probably some Hitchcocks I would throw there as well. Like Vertigo is quite routinely thrown around as the greatest film of all time. If somebody told me they thought it was the greatest film of all time, I would, on most days, probably agree with them. There are lower stakes Hitchcocks, like Rope. We've talked about Rope here before. If you told me Rope was your idea of a perfect film, I wouldn't question it. The only thing that I think could hold Rope back is that when they make the cuts, it's usually pretty obvious that they're going for a cut. Otherwise, why would you randomly zoom in on someone's back? But but I don't think that holds the film back. Like, no pun intended. But there's definitely Hitchcock's Rear Window. There's another one where if somebody told me that was a perfect movie, I think I would agree. There's whole genres that have basically been born out of Hitchcock films. And the originators are usually the originators for a reason. So if I had to pick one, I feel like I'd go Vertigo. just because it's another one that's a little auspicious in its scope, but I think he sticks the landing absolutely. And that 4K they just did a Vertigo. Chef's
gorgeous.
Kiss. It looks
gorgeous. So
it looks
good.
beautiful. But yeah, and I mean, there's so many that you could probably put out. But like, if I'm going for something more recent, it's probably Memento. If I'm going for like all of film ever, I'm probably going for something like Vertigo.
I've also called Jurassic Park a perfect film, which I stand by that. The first Jurassic Park, perfect
I
movie.
wouldn't disagree with you. It is, when you think like summer blockbuster, it's arguably the perfect template in what it achieves and what it accomplishes and how it's put together.
I think perfect movie is kind of this almost. It sounds funny, but it's almost. I would have trouble defining it. Okay, because like Jurassic Park, for example, there's this sort of continuity error that's pretty famous with the with the T-Rex enclosure, where it steps out and attacks people, but then when the Jeep goes over the side, it's suddenly a big cliff.
Yep.
It makes no sense. But to me, that doesn't stop it from being a perfect movie. And you call it movie magic because you don't care in the heat of the moment or watching the scenes. You're that caught up in it. I don't know. But like, to me, a perfect movie doesn't mean there's no continuity errors or plot holes, whatever you want to call it. Like that's sort of beside the point. Like you mentioned Rear Window, and there is a scene of Rear Window that always bugs me because it's a timeless movie, but there's one scene that dates it hard in the climax whenever he falls out the window.
Oh,
and the footage is sped up for some reason, and they all come running out. Like I hear like Benny Hill music in my head. Like the editing's very strange. Like it feels so dated and it bothers me. But like, yeah, it's still a perfect movie. So yeah, I don't exactly have a definition for it. It's like when you know kind of thing.
It's kind of a similar vibe to just the idea of trying to pick the greatest film of all time. Like anytime I see a list that's like, here's the top 10 greatest films of all time, I always kind of groan. And don't get me wrong, I probably used to be the guy that was like, obviously the greatest film of all time is X. Like, and now I've kind of evolved to that. Like what I said about Vertigo. If you told me Vertigo was the greatest film of all time, or if you asked me offhand, Vertigo is probably my go-to answer. But the real answer is like, first and foremost, there's a much more base answer to what is the greatest film of all time, and is the exact same response Harrison Ford had to Who Shot First. I don't know and I don't care. I like, when it comes to the greatest film of all time, I don't know what it is, and I really don't care what it is. I watch things, I enjoy those things, or I don't enjoy those things. That's really where it stops. The greatest film of all time is whatever you think it is. The greatest film of all time is inside your heart. And if you want to say A Knight's Tale is a perfect film, then it's a perfect film. Because you don't have to justify it to us, folks. You don't have to justify it to anyone. It's all about you and what you enjoy. And if someone gives you grief for it, tell them they're being mean. And hey, we don't have to be mean.
With that, join us next week for more dinosaur movies. Link up into our Discord. Leave us some questions for future episodes. And remember, maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch for the music. You can check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for a SoundCloud link. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.
Big budget return for a franchise that to that point had been laying dominant for 15 years. So
I think you mean dormant, Andrew.
What did I say?
Dominant.
Laying dominus for so many years. But yes, you are correct. Dormant.
Andy Buckley, if you've seen The Office, you know him as Michael. No, not Michael.
David.
I was scared of name. Michael Wallace?
David Wallace.
Is his name also Michael?
No, his name is David.
David
Wallace.
Right. David Wallace. I knew a Michael Wallace. That's what it was.
Yes. Has come through and made things possible. So I agree. But yeah.
Bless you.
And that's all I have to say about that. No.